A number of people ask me what books I'm reading now. And this is a very difficult question to answer because at any given time, I probably have about 50 books on my Kindle and probably about 6 or 7 hardcover or softcover physical books that I'm cycling through. So literally, I open up my Kindle, I look through based on my mood. I'll flip to whichever book matches up to my mood. I'll flip to whatever part of it looks the most interesting, and I'll just read that part. So I don't read in a sequential order. And the most important thing that does for me is it lets me just lets me read on a regular basis. And so I can actually just pull up my Kindle here and I can read off the names of some of these books that I'm reading. And I can give you mini reviews, but I haven't actually finished any of them. So they're all in progress. So at any given time, I'm always reading some science fiction because sci-fi is always very imaginative, in terms of, hypothesizing how the world's going to work out. Usually has an interesting point of view. You learn a little science. So just based on friends' recommendations, I've been flipping through Greg Egan, brilliant writer, physicist, I believe, who has written some very hardcore sci-fi stories. So I've been reading a book from him called Distress. I've always got collections of science fiction. I finished The Martian, which was decent, but I felt like it went on a little bit too long. I know it's a very popular book with some people. Love graphic novels, so I've been rereading The Boys recently, which is one of my favorite graphic novels of all time. Getting into kind of the more evolution science kind of books. Matt Ridley's The Evolution of Everything. I recommend everything by Matt Ridley, actually. I think he's great. So I really highly recommend picking up Genome, The Red Queen, Origins of Virtue, The Rational Optimist, and The Evolution of Everything. I'm reading The Essential Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. Been reading, let's see, I've got here The Tao of Philosophy, Alan Watts. I've got Illusions, Richard Bach, which I read before, but I'm flipping through again. I just like the way it flows. The Bed of Procrustes, Aphorisms by Nassim Taleb, who's famous for The Black Swan and Fooled by Randomness. But I sort of like his collection of ancient wisdom in The Bed of Procrustes. The Lessons of History by Will and Ariel Durant, which was actually recommended by one of the listeners in the first podcast. Great book. I really like how it summarizes some of the larger themes of history, very incisive. And unlike most history books, it's actually really small, and it covers a lot of ground. I've actually been reading my brother's book. I just finished How to Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It, and I thought it was great, very succinctly written. Obviously a plug for my bro. I was reading Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, although I think I'll put that down. I get it, but halfway through it's just a giant drug-fueled orgy by Hunter S. Thompson and his friend, so that it was entertaining, but I sort of gave up after a bit. Richard Feynman, been reading Perfectly Reasonable Deviations and also rereading Genius. I'm rereading The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell. Sometimes I think it's better just to reread the greats than it is to read something, that's not as great. In the philosophy side, I've been rereading the Tao Te Ching, and I just finished, Falling into Grace by Adyashanti, which I thought was very good. Let's see. Also read some Jed McKenna recently. He's a weird one. I'm not sure I'd recommend him for everybody. God's Debris by Scott Adams. Very interesting. The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. There's a Mouthful for You by Julian James. Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha by Daniel Ingram. That's a great book, actually, recommended to me by a friend. It's available online. I would get that one. I thought it was if you're interested in Buddhism, meditation, insight, I thought that one was a great, one that brought everything together while leaving the mysticism out of it. That should give you an indication. I'm always reading something by Krishnamurti. Usually it's Total Freedom, which is the book that I just reread over and over the most. Very difficult book. Doesn't necessarily make sense for everybody, but when you're ready for it, there's nothing else like it. I also recently finished The Power of Habit, or close to finish it, as close as I ever get. That one was interesting, not because of its content necessarily, but just because it's good for me to always keep and top of mind how powerful habits are. Habits are everything. Humans are basically habit machines. We form habits and we run in those habits all day long. And habits can be great because they help us get things done very efficiently without having to reprocess them all the time. They can also be terrible because we can have addictions. Those are the obvious bad habits. But also they allow us to go through our life unconsciously and mindlessly. So it's very important to be aware of your habits and know how to break habits and know how to make habits. And I have this daily workout that I do that I think I mentioned in the last podcast. And a lot of people ask about it. I think that one is interesting, but the specific technique matters less. The most important thing is just doing some kind of physical activity every single day. And if you can, make it the same activity at the same time, because that right there will teach you the power of habits. If you do something 7 days a week with no exceptions, and you work out early in the morning or when you first get up, then it will automatically fix all kinds of other bad habits that you have. You can't be out drinking late at night. You can't be out partying. You can't sleep in. You can't consume too much caffeine. There are all kinds of other habits in your life that may be bad that get fixed if you stick to your daily workout habit. And then it teaches you what the power of a habit is. And then as you shed other bad habits, then you realize that habits can be broken, and you start breaking them. So I think learning how to break habits is actually a very, very important meta skill that can serve you better in life than almost anything else. And although you can read tons of books on it, and I recommend you should go read all the books on it, the reality is you're never going to learn how to break bad habits until you just break them. And so one thing I try to do is I try and break a bad habit every 6 months, and I try and pick up a good habit every 6 months to a year. And you can't beat yourself up too much on it, but I don't think it's too much to ask if you were to say to yourself in 2016, I'm going to break one bad habit. I'm going to do everything in my power just to take down that one habit, and everything else will be static. I'm not going to get any worse, but that will help move the ball forward. And then you get gradual improvements in your life that you stick with. Like I used to be pretty overweight, and I've lost weight over the last decade, where now I feel I'm pretty fit and healthy. And it hasn't come through any single big epiphany or realization, although definitely going paleo helped, and understanding low carb helped, and getting rid of processed foods helped, and all those kinds of things. But it mainly came from just habit changes, and changing habits slowly but steadily over the course of a decade. So the good news is I've almost never slid backwards. I've never felt in danger of regaining the weight that I've lost. And now at the age of 42, I'm probably within 1 pound of my lightest weight since I was an adult. And I think that just comes from having stacked down a bunch of good habits and having gotten rid of a bunch of bad habits. So I would say the power to make and break habits, learning how to do that is really important. And if you're gonna leave this podcast and pick up 2 skills in life, I would say, and it depends on the person, because many of you, Tim's entire audience is a bunch of overachievers. So, many of you are way ahead of me on both of these, but for those of you who may be behind on one of them, I would say first realize that happiness is a choice and it is a skill, and you can dedicate yourself to learning that skill and making that choice and telling people about it and working on it, and you can slowly but steadily over the course of years make yourself happier. And similarly, I would say that habits are, breaking habits is a skill, and it is something you can learn, and start with a small habit and try different techniques to break it. Try substituting, try going cold turkey, try weaning yourself off, try social proof by telling other people that you're going to break the habit, try putting other habits around it that leave you no time for that habit, try removing the triggers, try toning down the rewards, do whatever it takes, but break one bad habit this year. And once you pick up that skill, it's a beautiful thing, because then slowly you can shed all your bad habits and make room for good habits in your life.